today's name, actually, we're going to look at two names today for God. We started the series 2 weeks ago talking about the different names of God. And God has multiple names, not just God, not just Lord, not just Father. Those are the three we probably know best. And we're primarily looking at the Old Testament names, the Hebrew names of God. Last week, we looked at Elohim, and that's the very first name of God revealed in the Bible, right there in Genesis 1, verse 1. And Elohim, we learned, is the name that really identifies God as the creator of the universe, the one who made you and I in his image, and everything that is made was made. He is pre-existent. He existed before time. He existed before space. He existed before matter. And this God created out of nothing, Elohim. And also Elohim is the God of covenant. A lot of times when you see a covenant like with Noah and Abraham and others, when the covenant is, people recall the covenant, they mention Elohim, or sometimes it's Yahweh Elohim. We'll get to Yahweh in a couple of weeks. So he's the God of creation, and he's the covenant-making God. And today we're going to look at two Hebrew names. The first one is El. E-L is how it looks in English. And by the way, let me give a shout out to a Bible version that I think Hillary uses. It's called the Names of God Bible. And I know on the Bible Gateway app and website, you can select that as one of your Bible versions that you want to read from on Bible Gateway. And I use that a lot. And in the names of God, it inserts the Hebrew each time that word is used, like in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim made the heavens and the earth. That's what it will say. So you get a quick reference as to what name of God is being referred to. So what I noticed, though, when I was doing my research and looking in the Names of God Bible, the two names we're going to talk about today, El and Elyon, I was looking and, was getting different counts. Someone would say, well, Elyon is used 12 times. Others would say it's used 7 or 8 times. Like, well, how can they disagree on this? Well, here's what I found out. For instance, in the Names of God Bible, if you look under Daniel chapter 4 and some other places in Daniel, a lot of Daniel was not written in Hebrew. It was written in Aramaic. And so you don't see these names Elohim and El. You see different names. You see the Aramaic Elah for El. And then there's another 2-word phrase for El Elyon in Daniel that's in Aramaic. So the counts were all off because of that. That's just a little side note. But the Names of God Bible really helps with knowing what Hebrew name is being referred to, or which Aramaic name is being referred to. That's a little commercial for the Names of God Bible version. El is the Hebrew word, and it means power. It means might, and it means strength. And it's really the most basic Hebrew word for God. It's used about 250 times in the Old Testament, either as El in the Hebrew or as Elah, which is the Aramaic equivalent, is what we just talked about. And like the name Elohim that we looked at last week, El is actually plural. And it can mean multiple gods. It can refer to many of the many pagan gods in the Old Testament, or it can refer to the one true God. And this plural form can be deceiving. So when translators look at this, they really have to look at the context to know, is this talking about the one true God, or is it talking about multiple gods? Kind of like Elohim last week. So we also find the word El embedded in people's names that you're familiar with. Gabriel, there it is right there, means strength of God. So remember, El means strength and power and might. So keep that in mind. So Gabriel means strength of God. Michael, who is like mighty God. Raphael means God's medicine. Ariel is not the mermaid. That's Lily's favorite movie. She acts that all the time. She's Ariel. And anyway, Ariel has the name El embedded in it. It means God's lion. Daniel means God's judgment. Israel means one who has struggled with God. Emmanuel, you know that one, God with us. And Ishmael, God hears and God listens. So that name El of God is embedded in a lot of the names that you're already familiar with. Even my wife's name, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. So El is used widely throughout the Bible, and around 250 times. It's almost always used in the plural. Sometimes it's used in the singular, and it's almost always joined with another name for God, kind of like stacking names of God to, well, that's exactly what happens. So when you put El in front of another word for God, the El acts as a magnifier. So for instance, we're going to be studying El Shaddai next week. And El Shaddai means the powerful, all-sufficient God. It's not sufficient God, it's the all-sufficient God, so it magnifies it. The God who sees is El Roy. And so when you combine these things, it combines attributes of God in these powerful combinations. So El refers to the mighty, relentless power of God, his omnipotent strength when it's combined with other names or other attributes of God. It works as a magnifier, okay? Here's another instance, Echad. Echad means one God. But when you add the El Echad, it shows that God is not just one God, but he is the one and only true power and might, okay? Hanuman means faithful, but you put the El in front of it, El Hanuman, it means this is the God who is relentlessly powerful in his faithfulness. So nothing can keep him apart from, nothing can keep him from being faithful, because that's who he is, and he's relentlessly powerful in his faithfulness. Does that make sense? This El is a magnifier. It means God by itself, but when it's put with another name, it really magnifies the second name. All right, so today we're going to talk more about El Elyon. And El Elyon is one of those compound names of God where the stacking occurs, where El is used as a magnifier for Elyon. El Elyon. Elyon by itself means the heights, or one who dwells on the heights, or supreme, like the Supreme Court. Okay, one who's over others. And when you add El to the front of Elyon, El Elyon, you get the highest one, the most high God, or the God most high. And it can, I guess if you literally translated it, it would be the extremely exalted, sovereign high God, El Elyon. And so this is the name that designates God as the sovereign ruler of the whole universe. It emphasizes God's supremacy and his sovereignty over everything. El Elyon. And the best way when we're looking at these names of God to know their meaning and learn their meaning is really to go where they first appear, like we did last week with Elohim, Genesis 1:1. The first time El Elyon appears is in Genesis 14. Now, I'm going to give you a little background. Mark shared a little bit about this in his offering thoughts. So in Genesis 14, God has called Abram to pack up and leave his hometown Ur and travel to a new home far, far away. God doesn't know. I mean, Abram doesn't know where God is calling him to. He just, we hold Abraham really high because he acted in faith. He just went, right? And so Abraham packs up all his wealth, all his animals, all his people, family and servants and everybody else, and they head east. And they end up in a town called Mamre. It's near Hebron. And we know that Hebron today exists as a city. It's a very ancient city. It's still there. And it's about 20 miles southwest of Jerusalem. And that's where you can locate Hebron. And this is the area where Lot and his nephew and others settled. Actually, his nephew Lot did not settle there. Remember, they came upon the land and Lot chose to go somewhere else. So Abraham and the rest of the family settled in Mamre near Hebron. So Lot settled in a town called Sodom, in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah, sister cities. So 4 leaders from the east descended upon the region of Sodom and Gomorrah. They ransacked. They took Lot as their captive, among with a whole bunch of other people and a lot of their possessions and money. Okay, so they've kidnapped Lot. Well, somebody survives, comes and finds Abraham there in Mamre near Hebron and tells him what happened. Abraham says, you don't mess with my family, okay? So Abraham gathers a fighting force among his own people of 318 trained fighters. Now, this shows you that Abraham was a wealthy man, that he had not just his family with him, he had a large following of servants and other people who have come under his leadership there, and they formed a community there near Hebron. So he has 318 the men that are trained for fighting, and he takes them, and they're in hot pursuit. He and his militia overtake the combined armies of 4 kings. 318 men. We have no idea how big these other armies are, but there's 4 kings and their armies. Surely they had a lot more men than 318. And they overtake them, and they capture back all the people. They capture back all the plunder. They defeat these kings. And this was a huge military success against all odds. That kind of catches us up to where we're going to read today. Now, after the victory, 2 kings come out to meet Abram. One is the king of Sodom, the defeated king of Sodom. He's one of the armies that was defeated and his city was ransacked. And also the king of Salem. Now, Salem is the ancient word for Jerusalem. Before Israel came to possess the land, it was known as Salem. And this is a Canaanite area. They're pagans. They're polytheists. Okay. So we have the king of Salem, who's also the priest of Salem, coming out. His name is Melchizedek. And this is where we're going to find the name of Elyon appearing for the first time in Holy Scripture. And in these few verses, starting verse 18, it appears 4 times. All right. That's a little background to Genesis 14, starting in verse 18. Let's read this. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. And there is El Elyon right there. God Most High, that is El Elyon at the end of verse 18. Verse 19. And he blessed Abram, saying, blessed be Abram by, here it is again, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. Verse 20. And praise be to, here it is again, El Elyon, who delivered your enemies into your hands. Then Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the people and the goods, and keep the goods for yourself. So here's the king of Sodom, his city has been ransacked, and Abraham has everything, and he's coming to Abraham saying, hey, you know what? You keep the possessions, just give me the people. But Abraham told the king of Sodom, with raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, and that is Yahweh there. We'll talk about that name in a few weeks. I have sworn an oath to the Lord, Yahweh, El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. There's a few interesting things here. Up until this point, we have to remember that God has not revealed much about his nature to Abram. This is around 400 years after the Tower of Babel, when God dispersed all the people. There is no Holy Scripture to read. There is no temple. There is no 10 Commandments. There's no direct revelation from God that we know of. All we know is people being evil and trying to reach heavens by building a tower, trying to be like God, false gods worshipped everywhere. And out of all this, God calls a man, Abram, to come follow him, to pack all of his stuff and just to go. does Abram even know who the one true God is? We know that Abram calls him Yahweh, but does he really even have an understanding of who this Yahweh is? I don't think so, because later when God reveals himself to Moses as Yahweh, he says, the people before you don't really know who Yahweh is. So Abram, this God named Yahweh, whoever he is, appears to Abram and calls him. Now, when a God speaks to you, you better listen. And this is what Abram does before he's called Abram. Without much knowledge, without much understanding who Yahweh is, and he just acts on faith. And throughout Scripture, we can see progression of revelation of God to his people. God reveals himself progressively throughout time. And this is an example of that. So Abraham knows Yahweh, and he follows and worships Yahweh. We know when he travels and he arrives in Mamre near Hebron, he sets up an altar to Yahweh and he worships Yahweh. Now, it was 500 years later when Moses is going to go see God at the burning bush, and God is going to reveal more about who he is. So we got to remember the progressive nature of revelation when it comes to who God is. All right, so then we get to Melchizedek. Who is Melchizedek? He's a mysterious person is who he is. Everything we know, historically speaking, about Melchizedek is found right here in these verses. And there's not much. He's the God. He's the king of Salem, and he's the priest of Salem. That's about it. Now, Salem, like I said, is a Canaanite city. And this is a polytheistic pagan culture. And Melchizedek is a priest of this polytheistic pagan culture. And we don't know much more about Melchizedek, historically speaking. Actually, we don't know anything more. He is referred to as, his name means righteous king. We know that, righteous king. And he is referred to over in Psalms 110. And here it's addressing the king of Israel as God's chosen one. And he promises to bring victory in battle and to establish a king, it says, as a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So it's a kingly prophecy in Psalm that God is going to set up a king who's also a priest, whose throne and rule is going to last forever. Okay, so the psalmist declares that God will stand at the right hand of the king, and he's going to use him to bring judgment upon the nations. That's in Psalm 110. Of course, this is not just a prophecy about a Davidic king in Israel during that time or the near future. We know it as Christians as a messianic prophecy that Jesus himself will be our king and our priest in the order of Melchizedek, that his reign will last forever, and that through Jesus, all the nations are going to be judged and righteousness. He is the righteous king. But Abraham doesn't know anything about this. Abraham just knows that he had a great victory, and that Melchizedek says, this is Elyon who gave you this great victory. Well, how does Melchizedek, a polytheistic pagan priest, know about the one true God, Elyon? This is where it gets interesting and confusing at the same time. There's no real hard evidence to think that Melchizedek has become a monotheist, that he worships only the one true God. He might, but we don't know. He's a Canaanite priest who most likely, at least at one time, worshipped multiple gods. So what's going on here? Well, one thing we know from reading ancient Ugaritic and Phoenician literature is that Elyon was actually a god of the Canaanites. He's named Elyon in the ancient literature. So it could be that Melchizedek is referring to Elyon, a Canaanite god, which really messes me up. I don't know about y'all, but how can Melchizedek give credit to a Canaanite God for what Yahweh has done for Abraham? And one thing we know through this conversation between Abram and Melchizedek, Abram equates his Yahweh with Melchizedek's Elyon, because he says, I have, with raised hand, in verse 22, with raised hand, I have sworn an oath to Yahweh Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. So whatever this means, Abraham takes the name Elyon as a revelation, a further revelation of who Yahweh is. So Melchizedek, it could be, you remember when God called Abram, he was a pagan and he was coming from a polytheistic culture. In fact, in Joshua chapter 24, we read, it says that Abraham's father and family worshiped multiple gods. They had gods that they worshiped, and Abram was called by God out of this culture. So God appeared to Abram, when he was a polytheistic pagan. And perhaps he did the same thing to Melchizedek. That somehow God revealed himself to Melchizedek as Elyon, the true Elyon. This reminds me of Acts, when Paul is going to Athens, is at Mars Hill, and Paul comes upon these people, and there's statues of gods everywhere, and he says, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around carefully and looking at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. So the people at Mars Hill were spiritual, they were religious, they worshiped multiple gods, and they had one God statue set aside for the unknown God. And Paul is revealing progressive revelation. Paul is revealing who this one true God really is, the one and only God. And that reminds me of maybe what's going on with Melchizedek here, that he knew the Canaanite God Elyon among all the pantheon of multiple Canaanite gods. And maybe God has called out Melchizedek just like he did to Abraham and revealed himself to Melchizedek. And now Melchizedek is revealing Elyon to Abraham. We don't really know what's going on here. That's the best I can do with explaining the situation. But whatever it is, Abraham grabs it and goes with it. And the Bible grabs it and goes with it. So you'll see Elyon appear a few more times, sometimes in the Aramaic, like in Daniel. Daniel really likes El and Elyon. So you'll see that several times there and in the Psalms. So let's look again at a few of the verses that we just read, verses 19, 20, and then 22, where this name appears. So Melchizedek blesses Abram, and he says, blessed be Abram by Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. So he's making a statement. Elyon has blessed you, Abram, and Elyon is the creator of heaven and earth. He is above all. Some of your older English translations may say the possessor of heaven and earth, and that's an okay translation. I think creator, for what I've read, is probably a more literal translation of the Hebrew there. Blessed be Abram by Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. Verse 20. And praise be to Elyon, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. And then Abram turns around to the king of Sodom and says, I swear an oath to Yahweh Most High, or Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. Abram stacks. Now, he didn't just stack El and Elyon. He's stacking Yahweh, El, and Elyon. This is a big stack. And you see these names combined throughout Scripture, not just these three names, but other names, sometimes two, sometimes three. And remember, every time you stack, you're magnifying. You're trying to express who God really is. And this is, you can't express. We cannot fully express who God is. This is why God reveals himself with so many different names, so we can sort of kind of get a hint at a start of understanding how magnificent, how awesome our God really is. So what are we going to do with this information? First thing, I think we have to remember and be reminded constantly that Elyon is the only one worthy of our worship, because he's not just a high God. He is the most high God. He is the extremely exalted, sovereign, supreme, most high God. He is the sovereign ruler over the entire universe. He created the whole universe. He is sovereign over everything. Okay, that's number one. So we got to learn to give him the glory that is due to him. There is no other. In so doing, we'll come to know that his name is Elyon. So he does, number one, our Elyon deserves, he's the only one worthy of our worship. So we have to ask ourselves, is there anything else that is in the place of Elyon that we're putting in the place of Elyon? Anything else that we're lifting higher than our Elyon? And that's where we have to come to reality check and make sure we're not doing that. Number two, we got to remember that Elyon is above all our problems. And he's above all the principalities. He's above all the powers on earth. And it seems that those three things, those three P words, our problems, the powers, and the principalities of earth, are usually what gets all of our attention. It gets all of our focus. We worry about these things. We are afraid of these things. We try to hide from these things. And what's this saying? You may feel outnumbered. You may feel overwhelmed. You may feel defeated. And you really may feel you're in the need of a victory over problems. You need a victory over the powers and principalities of this world. And you feel defeated. So we have to ask, well, who is your source of power? Who is your victory? Where is your victory to be found? Abraham's 318 trained fighting men did not win that battle. Elyon won that battle. The victory is Elyon's. It was Elyon who delivered Abram's enemies into his hands, according to Melchizedek. So you and I can live with confidence, knowing that Elyon is the supreme and sovereign ruler of the universe, and that ultimately he has the power to defeat any and every enemy. He has the power to help you overcome your problems. He has the power to defeat any power and any principality. So, and the third thing is about our tithes and offerings. Now, this is really the first time tithe is mentioned in the Bible. It's where the whole idea comes from. And Elyon gets credit for blessing Abraham's victory, awesome victory. And how does Abram respond? He responds by giving him a tenth of everything. And this is a declaration that God is our victory and supreme sovereign over our lives. Abram acknowledged that Elyon was the source of his victory. And he responded out of gratitude and out of worship by giving him a tenth of everything. He gave a tenth of everything to Melchizedek in honor of, in the name of Elyon. So the tithe, regardless of what you've heard, the tithe did not originate in Judaism, in the religion of Judaism. It was not connected to the temple. It was not out of legalism that people had to start giving. It all came as a spontaneous act of worship, a spontaneous act of being grateful to Elyon, that Abram decides to give a tenth of everything he has. It's interesting that the king of Sodom is right there saying, hey, Abram, you can keep the possessions, just give me the people. And Abram says, you know what? I don't want you to get any credit for what making me rich. You can have it all. But first he gives a tenth to Melchizedek in honor of Elyon. So king of Sodom comes demanding, and Abram dismisses it. And you and I have choices of what we give to. We have some things that demand our time, that demand our possessions, that demand our money. And they just say, I'll make a deal with you. And we can compromise. But Abram says, I'm not going to compromise. I'm going to give a tenth first to Elyon. You can have the rest. So that's another lesson for us. So the three things I think we can apply, and there's multiple things we can apply here. Number one, that God is Elyon. He is the only one worthy of our worship. Number two, Elyon is above all our problems and all the powers and all the principalities on earth, and we can run to him when we are outnumbered, when we're overwhelmed, and when we need a victory. And number three, our tithes and offerings are a declaration that God is our victory and the supreme sovereign over our lives. So each time you give, online, text, writing a check or whatever, putting cash in an envelope, whatever it is, you are making a declaration that Elyon is your victory. He is the supreme sovereign over your life. You're not just doing a religious checklist, checking a thing off when you're writing that check. Now, I'm going to close with two different Psalms today, or sections of two different Psalms. You can go ahead and turn to Psalm 47 and then Psalm 57. If you can go ahead and turn there. We're going to just read the first few verses of each Psalm. But both these Psalms mention Elohim that we talked about. El and or Elohim that we talked about this week. So Psalm and Psalm 50. And as we read this, I want you to notice that the attributes of God that we've already discussed in the last 2 weeks, you'll see refuge and safety. You'll see victory. You'll see vindication. You'll see God's faithful covenant love. You'll see praise and worship. You're going to see God's awesome power and his supreme rule over the world. Let's look at Psalm 47, 1-4. Clap your hands, all you nations. Shout to Elohim with cries of joy. For Yahweh, El Elyon, is awesome. The great king over all the earth. He subdued nations under us, peoples under our feet. He chose our inheritance for us, the pride of Jacob, who he loved. So there in Psalm 47, we see Yahweh, Elohim, and Elyon all mentioned together. Psalm 57, verses 1-3. Have mercy on me, my Elohim. Have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I cry out to God Most High, or Elohim Elyon, the two words combined there. I cry out to Elohim Elyon, to El, who vindicates me. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. Elohim sends forth his love and his faithfulness. You see all the themes there that we've already discussed? Victory and vindication, refuge and safety, covenant love, praise and worship, God's awesomeness, his power, his supreme sovereignty over all the world. So El Elyon, the God Most High, is the extremely exalted, sovereign, high God. And this is the God who made himself known in some fashion, not clear how, to a pagan polytheistic Canaanite priest, Melchizedek. And the same God who brought Abram out of similar religious beliefs, El Elyon, is the same God who called you and me out of a life of sin and unbelief. We're like Abraham. We're like Melchizedek. God met us in our sin and revealed himself to us and called us out. I'm going to end with Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 8. This is a familiar passage. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Aren't you glad that you and I don't have to prove ourselves before Christ would die for us? Aren't you glad that we don't have to live up to certain expectations before God reveals himself to us? God is someone who reaches out to the lost. Those of us, everybody who's sinned and far from God. In a minute, Lido is going to lead us in a prayer for people who are far from God, for the lost, for people living in a way that doesn't acknowledge or follow God. Well, that's where we were. That's where Abram was. That's where Melchizedek was. And I'm so thankful that God meets us where we are and reveals himself to us. Aren't you? Let's pray together. God, thank you so much that you defeated the powers and principalities of my internet problems today. And you gave us victory in just this little thing. But we look to you as the supreme sovereign ruler of the universe, who created everything and is in control of everything. And there's so much about this name. I wish I had time to go into Daniel chapter 4 and chapter 7 and other places where it talks about how Elyon, of course, it uses the Aramaic there, is supreme. And he's supreme over all the governments and kings of the world. And he gives them to whomever he wishes. And I'm reminded, Lord, about our country and the transition of power between President Trump's administration and President Biden's, and how you ultimately, it doesn't matter who our president is, Jesus is king. And you are the one who's truly in charge of everything. And I pray for our country, Lord. I pray for our leaders that they will bow the knee and acknowledge that you are Elyon, that you are the one who gives victory, that you are the one who is truly in charge. And I pray for our own lives, Lord, that in our individual private lives, whether we are followers of Jesus or not, that you will reveal yourself to us as Elyon, the only one worthy to be worshiped, the only one true, high, mighty, supreme sovereign of the universe, who is the ruler of everything, the only one who deserves our worship, and the only one who we should run to when we have problems and we're afraid and have difficulties with powers and principalities. And Lord, may our tithes and offerings be out of our gratitude and our worship to Elyon. You have blessed us richly, Lord. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.